Okay. So I should be here, then I should be seen, but we will see. Okay. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Galang back in the Masaryk University, and back because he was there like 3 years ago for he stayed here for 2 years, and he's now back in Brno, back in Masaryk University, and he will introduce some interesting topics about measuring skills, creativity, and tomorrow about the imagination. So thank you that you all came, and it's yours.
Thank you, Katka. Thank you, everybody, for being here, making time. Thank you to all the colleagues who are online joining us from all over. So if in case you want the slides, they are freely accessible on the link that you're seeing up there. Yeah, create skill. So I only realize now that it seems to spell creates kill. So not my intention. So it creates skill. 01. So yeah. So what I'm going to talk about in this lecture are some of my ideas. They're very preliminary. So I'm trying to develop them. And I'm hoping like people who are interested in, measurement, assessment of skills, or just thinking about skills or creativity might have ideas also. Because I think this is something that people have, some people, lots of people say that they're working on, measuring creativity or measuring creativity as a skill, but I don't think we've put enough thinking in what they are doing. I'll try to explain what I mean. So yeah, so colleagues who work in, educational psychology, education, I'm very much interested to hear your thoughts. Students who are studying the same, I would like to, if you see, if any of these connects with your interests or ideas, let me know, because that might also kind of help develop what I'm trying to do here. Okay. Oh, sorry. Is it on? Oh, yeah. So this is like what I'll try to cover. I'll try to explain why I started thinking about this. I am primarily a personality psychologist. I work in individual differences. I do work in the psychology of creativity. That's like the main thing I've been doing over the decade that I've been working on it. But skills is a bit new to me. Okay, maybe not to people who study education. I think you have a far better track record than psychologists in studying and thinking about skills. So that's why I wanted to, find out what you think about this. So I'm motivated by two particular things I encountered recently. I'll tell you about them to kind of give you an idea why I started working on this. We'll try to define what a skill is by asking also what is not a skill. Trying to draw the boundaries of, what should count as a skill and what maybe shouldn't. I'll try to explain my idea that I think skills are things that you should be able to interrupt. That's one of the kind of characteristics they should have. And they should be capable of failing. They're fallible. If it can't fail and can't be interrupted, I don't think that's a skill. There are lots of things in psychology that can work that way, and sometimes you might say they're ability. And I want to say, yeah, those are abilities. Skills are something else, not the same. And then I want to say that, part of being a skill is you can calibrate it, you can tweak it, you can do both, meaning you can both think, meaning to be skilled in thinking, for example, meaning stealing from Daniel Kahneman. In order to be good at thinking, you should be capable of both thinking slow and fast. Just thinking slow all the time, meaning careful, or thinking fast all the time is not is not what I think to be skilled in terms of thinking. If you were thinking of skill as thinking as a skill, so what I'm saying is that no, it's like the flexibility that's part of being a skill. And then, yeah, I'll try to lay out. So, if any of that makes sense, how do you measure creativity, and why do I think some of the ways people in psychology, I might be failing to take into account things that people are doing education. Please, please correct me. Uh, uh, if if what I'm thinking about skills is correct, then how should you measure it then? How do you try to find out, you know, what levels of skill someone has? Okay, so yeah. So I'm going to focus on creativity because as I said, that's kind of my work all throughout the several years. And what I've noticed from like new work that people put out about measuring creativity, there are lots of like very flashy, interesting kind of new ways of measuring, testing creativity. But I think they all suffer from the same problem that when they create one, the way they will prove to you that they work is by correlating it with another creativity test that they assume to be working good. And that's the big question mark. Does that other test work? Cool. One example, a very nice example that like uh, um, exploits large language models, but in a different way from like chatbots. Uh, they use a large language model that relates different in English, different words, how much certain words are related to each other, and then the instruction for this test is try to come up with a list of around 7 words, and all of those 7 words need to be very different from each other, as different from each other as possible. So what you see here is over here would be someone who would score low because the words arm, eyes, feet, hand, head, leg, and body, they're all related. As I hope you can see, they're all kind of body related things. So you get a low score for that. This one should have a slightly better score. And this one has like maximal, or at least not maximal, but very high score. Because the words hippo, jumper, machinery, prickle, tickets, tomato, violin, at least in English, they are very, very linguistically, like, I mean, in terms of meaning, they're quite different from each other. And they use, an automated way to score each person on that. And they say that this seems to be a possible new way of measuring creative thinking. And the way they prove that is by relating it to some other kind of test. Um, the particular test that they use is something that is very familiar to me and to lots of other creativity researchers because it's kind of the go-to and it's not that hard to administer or create or use. So it's called the divergent thinking task. And one example is this. So uh, the instruction could be, okay, here's an empty picture frame. What could be some creative uses of this? Meaning, think of like ways to use a picture frame that has nothing in it, isn't it? That's not the usual way to use a picture frame. If you want to try it out, you can go to slido.com and plug in the numbers. So anybody also online following us can do this. No names will be shown, so meaning don't worry. You can just give any answer, as many answers as you want. So feel free. We'll wait a little bit, but this is an example of a divergent thinking task. Other kinds of divergent thinking task might ask usually work very similarly. Like classic ones would be try to name as many as you can things that are round, and they have to be all different. Okay, so usually those kinds of tasks rely on your ability to generate lots of stuff that are hopefully different from each other and also unusual that not anybody or not maybe not the average person would think of. So yeah, so that's one, and then there are others that are less common, and yeah, but almost all of them are kind of word based on words language. A few are based on like pictures or drawings. But it seems like the easiest to use, create, and score are like word-based creativity tests like this. Cookie cutter. That's good. Especially if it has like frilly designs or it has weird shapes. Just put it around your neck. Form of self-expression. What are you expressing? Okay, that's good. Let's wait for, I think a few people are still typing. And then of course we have to move on. We can't wait for all answers. A few more. Hopefully make it short. Use it as a fence or an ant farm. Oh, yeah. Or ruler math. Definitely. Add a picture. And that's interesting. Add a picture. Okay. So that means usually you would score something like this as. That's why it's important in the instructions to define what creative is. So you would say something in addition to the instructions like, try to think of something that's not the usual use of a kind of picture frame. So I mean, this is valid because no one said that you can't list it. Fancy toilet seat, maybe. Oh, okay. Depends on might hurt. You can use plant flower, a garden, yeah. In your presentation. Oh, you can hold it up, maybe. Hamster enclosure. Yeah. Maybe if you break it up. Okay, so I think sorry for anybody who's still answering. We need to move on, but just to give you an idea of how it works, this is what it looks like. And my problem is, like I said, I've been doing this kind of thing. I've been using things like these. I've been making lots and lots of people answer things like these. And one difficulty I have is like the question always comes up: does it actually work? Is it measuring something that actually is related to creativity? Meaning, usually what we think about creativity is like some kind of capability to do creative stuff like create a poem or design a building, think of a new scientific theory. Those are the actual things that we mean. And so this is like a proxy. But the question is, some proxies are better than others, and some proxies don't relate at all to the thing you want to really measure. And my problem is, I've been seeing in my data, and I think it's been seen in other people's data, that the different kinds of creativity tests like this don't always correlate with each other very well. You would expect them to correlate with each other. They all claim to be measuring something related to creativity, so you should expect something like that. After all, IQ tests, that's what IQ tests do. All of the different components of an IQ test, they all correlate very highly with each other. Not so for creativity tests like these. That's a big problem. It makes me ask, what the F are we measuring? We're measuring something, but what is it? So that's my problem. So meaning one, I'm not sure that making up new tests always gets us where we want. It might be nice and fun, but no. Another thing, that's one motivation, meaning I'm having this problem about do the tests work. Another thing that motivated me on this path is when they published a group of personality psychologists who mostly worked on personality traits, but they were now branching out in terms of measuring skills. So that was interesting to me. So they have this questionnaire. It's an inventory. It's a questionnaire. You can even answer it online, and it will give automated results. Maybe you can try it later, but after all, the slides are free to get. And they have, they bundle together lots of different things that they think of as skills. Here are some examples of what they mean. Meaning, here are the big categories that are part of their inventory. So it's a collection of questionnaires, an inventory. And here are some of the sub-scales, meaning individual questionnaires within that. As you can see, we have creativity here as part of innovation skills. We have for cooperation skills things like perspective taking, capacity for trust, capacity for warmth, teamwork, ethical competence. A lot of these things kind of overlap with something that maybe education people are familiar with. There are lots of like bodies, international bodies working on things that they call 21st century skills. You've probably heard of this, maybe 21st century skills. Lots of academics, universities, global bodies are trying to kind of push in that direction of defining what these 21st century skills are. finding out how to measure them. And of course, the main idea is how to, make improve them in people, in students particularly. So that all of this sounds nice, of course. So these are quite valuable. My problem is it's not clear exactly what skills mean in this inventory. And yeah, that's also part of like motivation. I want to try to understand what they mean. And I think there might be a better way to think about skills than what they currently have. Uh, because in their papers, they tend to define skills in this way. Their capacities compared, meaning they're trying to define it as a capacity to make it supposedly different from a personality trait. Meaning a personality trait is supposedly not a capacity. Meaning it's not about what you can do. It's more like a personality trait is like what you do often or usually. Like if you talk a lot, it's not about whether you can talk. It's about, do you like talking? Do you do it a lot? Do you do it often, every day? Whereas capacity supposedly are, can you do it? Can you do it well? Can you do it a lot? Meaning in terms of production. Meaning other things like, say, memory could be thought of as a capacity, and usually it's measured that way. So they want to say, this is not, even though some of them sound like they're just personality traits, like, perspective taking maybe, or creativity is sometimes defined as a personality trait, but no. They want to say, well, we're talking about capacities here. And supposedly they can be trained. They define it that way to differentiate it from abilities that they think should not be, not necessarily or easily trainable. Like intelligence, IQ, to some extent, things like maybe like memory capacity, although clearly, because you might know that kind of sport called memory athletics, meaning you can train yourself into having this vast amount of memory, and you can join those competitions where you memorize like random stacks of cards. You can just do it. So clearly, there's some trainability there, but so at some other level, there are limits, hard limits to memory. So you can say that, yeah, probably skill. The part of the memory athlete that is the skill is the part that's being trained. Sure. So that they want to define it that way to differentiate it from ability. But the thing is, maximal performance is something that they also add to differentiate it from questionnaire, where usually traits, personality traits, like are you sociable? Those are measured not as maximal capacity. But things like memory is meaning you have to get as many right answers as possible. Meaning in a personality questionnaire, there are no right answers. So they want to say skills are like that. Meaning if you like, think of like skill of an airplane pilot, there's a way to do it right and there are ways to do it wrong. So what you want the pilot in training to display is that they can do it to the best ability optimally with no mistakes. So that's maximal performance. So they want to say, yeah, that's part of being a skill. It kind of sounds like also something that would be the way you measure an ability, but they're saying, yeah, but abilities are not so trainable. So that's how we say that they're different. I'm not so satisfied with this. I have problems with this definition. If you're interested, maybe I can explain some of my objections to this, but instead I'll just focus on my own way of defining skills. But later, if you want, we can review some of the things why I think this is not good enough, at least for differentiating skills from, say, abilities or traits or other things. Okay. So I'd like to begin by asking, so what things do I think on my understanding of skills? What things are not skills? I think things like, just basically being able to differentiate one pitch from another, say like two pitches, two notes, musical notes that are, one semitone, two semitones apart. It should be easy for anybody, even without musical training, to differentiate those things. And we do know that there's an ability connected to that because some people are born with an inability to detect differences between semitones. They're called that condition is called amusia. Seems to be kind of a genetic, congenital. So clearly, there's something there. And I want to say, yes, that's an ability. It's not something you have to train to have. You have it. Some people can make it better, but the thing is, the thing you're making better is not the core ability. It's something else. Okay. probably something metacognitive, something you kind of strategy you're layering on top. But I want to say, just being able to discriminate tones, not skill, that's an ability. Being able to, say, adjust your perception of color for available light is just something you have. You don't have it if you say there's something wrong with your retina, with your rods and cones, etc. But as long as you have the machinery in your eyes and in your brain, not something you have to train. Okay. And the thing is, it works, without much conscious intervention. And I don't know if you remember this. This was kind of probably the biggest perceptual experiment in the world by accident. It's like picture of this dress. People were asking the seemingly innocent question, "What color is this dress?" And there were, global conflicts spawned by the dress. And the thing is, as you can see, this demonstration shows it's perfectly possible as long as you interpret the background light availability to be different. Perfectly possible that this looks like blue and black, and this indeed looks like white and gold. It's the same because this shade is the same as that shade. This shade is the same as that shade. But the thing is, this happens. The computation happens in our brains with no intervention, not much, conscious, nothing you can do about it. And so it's when you really feel that you're right, there's no way for you to kind of change your mind because it's not something you reasoned out, not something you reasoned out. And that's why I don't think that's a skill. Which gives you a clue about what I think about skills. There has to be some kind of processing that's explicit. Not necessarily reasoning out, but something close to that. What is a skill? I think reading is a skill. And it clearly at some point becomes automatic, as demonstrated by the famous Stroop effect experiment. So it's like you're supposed to read the font color and ignore the word. Okay? And if you're trying to do this very quickly with a long list of words, you can make mistakes. Okay? And what's happening is you're trying to override your almost automatic tendency to read stuff rather than say colors. That is not something that adults do a lot, like orange, white. Okay, that would be weird if you, you still do that. So usually you read words. Yeah, that's why it becomes automatic. But the thing is, the fact that you can still do the truth task well means you can stop yourself. I think that's an important part of being a skill. There's some, controllability, interruptibility there. It's not automatic fully. Even something like reading that, is almost automatic. It's not really. And that's part of how I define skill. So yeah, right now, the way I think we can kind of try to define skills is it should have these kinds of characteristics. It should be able to fail, meaning there has to be ways to tell whether you're doing it right or wrong. Not a skill if there's no even conceptual way to define what is right or wrong in this scenario. That's why some personality traits, it's not skill. There's no right or wrong about it. Some other psychological constructs, it's hard to define what is success or failure in those states. So those are definitely not skills. So yeah, it can fail. Abilities can fail too. But for some of the examples I gave, they cannot fail in the same way as skills. Meaning, the only way you would fail, say, to detect difference between two semitones is either you're not really paying attention, or you just you are intentionally making a mistake, or there's really something wrong with your system, your sound processing system. That's not the same thing as failing in a skill. So it's interruptible, like I said, but you could, because I don't want to say that it's controllable. That I'm trying to avoid that because it's not always true. Especially if you get to expert level skills, sometimes it just goes. Okay, once you get to some high level of a skill. It just works. But at the very least, you can interrupt it. You can stop yourself from doing it. Like in the Stroop task, you can stop yourself from reading the word. Okay, even though you feel this strong urge to read the word. Okay, and it can be displayed at will, meaning I can choose to do it now or not do it. Okay, I can choose to perform this well or not perform it well. I think that's important, and I don't think abilities, as defined, works that way. Okay. So I think there is some evidence for what I want to do from past study. And I think my account explains patterns in past studies better than, say, the account from the Bessie team of psychologists. There is this one 1987 study from Paulus and Martin that when they ask people to do something that looks like what the Bessie is also doing, it will ask you for certain kinds of things like, are you warm? Meaning as a person, meaning can you express kind of kindness and love towards another person? Warmth, interpersonal warmth. Can you do this? How well, or are you able to do this? What's your capacity for it? You can rate yourself on that, and a bunch of lots of other stuff like the opposite also of that, like coldness. How well can you maybe or I don't know if they included it, but I imagine you could put something like intimidation. How good are you at intimidating other people, like threatening them, making them afraid? You would expect. I mean, it would be consistent with the way the Bessie people think about traits. And indeed that's the way they think about it. That clearly these are not things that should go in the same direction. Like your ability to be warm should not be in. People who are able to be warm do not automatically possess the ability to be cold, or to intimidate people, maybe. But what they found is that, not to a strong extent, but to some extent, the people were reporting that if they were capable of things like kindness, warmth, cooperation, they would also say that they're quite capable of coldness, maybe showing anger to someone else if they needed to. That, I guess that's what it means. That if I needed to, I could show my anger, but I could also show my compassion, love. Okay, and that's interesting because that means that the success or failure that, say, Bessie is trying to define, like with uh, things like capacity for trust, capacity for warmth. I think these are just kind of, they're specifying the skill success definition in only one way, whereas you could just define it clearly on something like influence people, whether for good or ill. Okay, meaning probably more general is perspective taking, meaning if I know how to take your perspective and think like you think, meaning I can guess the way you are thinking right now, something like that. If I have that skill and I wanted to make you feel nice, I can do that because I can understand what you're thinking. But at the same time, if I wanted to make you afraid of me, I can do that too because I have the skill. So it's not the skill that defines the effect, it's your intention. The skill by itself, the success or failure conditions of it are simply influencing people. So meaning I feel that they are narrowly specifying kind of skills in that way. Maybe which is understandable. It's kind of easier to convince people, like say the UN, to support your study if you want to say that you're going to teach people to be team workers or perspective takers and people who are capable of trust, rather than also saying, but we will also maybe study if they can be bad people. Okay, the marketing of it might not be as nice. So, but the thing is, you're narrowly defining it, and if you take seriously the idea that it's supposed to be based on success conditions, then it's not just like, oh, I can make people trust. But the thing is, from results from Paulus and Martin, it seems that there is a maybe more core skill there. Okay, so meaning defining specifically the success and failure and treating that seriously as the characteristic of the skill, I think will let you avoid these kinds of misconceptions. Okay, so it's not, it's not just thinking fast or slow, or thinking kind and thinking, what's the opposite of kind? Thinking angrily or thinking intimidatingly. But the thing is, it's all about intention. You could do it. Maybe you just choose not to be to be a, say, intimidating person, but you could do it. That's the idea, and that's the idea. That's a better idea of capacity than what the basic people are shown. It's like, if you think about theater people, actors, okay, the skill is to be able to do all, not just one kind of emotion. So that's the skill, okay, to be able to convince people that you can be warm and cold, depending on whether you need it. And you could even say, I don't ever need to be cold. I intentionally don't use that side of me. But the thing is, if I needed to, I have the resources to do that. That's a skill. Okay. Meaning, yeah, and it's part of being intentional, and you can interrupt it, meaning you can stop yourself from, it's not something instinctive. So clearly, it can't be a skill if it's purely instinctive. Okay, so now we go back to the idea. So then, based on the way I think about, skills, what does that mean for measuring creativity? How should you do it? And I think it's implied by what I'm trying out, and I hope it's clear to you that this is, very tentative. I am, working through it in my mind whether this actually makes sense. But in the kind of definition of skills I'm trying out, it seems to imply that to be skilled in something is to be well calibrated, not just maximal performance. The idea of equating skill to maximal performance is, I think, incomplete. It's to be well calibrated, to be able to deliver the specific kind of maximal performance when required, and then to not do that when not required. It can't be that you can't stop the hose and you just gush out the maximal performance all the time. That's not skill. Okay, maybe that's some kind of trait or ability you have that you can't stop. You just keep doing it. So that's not skilled at all. That's not impressive. And one thing, yeah, the thing that leads me, this leads me is that this gives you an ability to distinguish people who are, because there are people who are deemed creative in their fields, possibly mostly because they're really unusual people. It's their weirdness that makes them creative. Meaning that does happen. Some people in certain fields, they're different enough from everybody else working in that field that they're perceived to be creative. And from time to time, they are, meaning they actually deliver something surprising in their field because they're really, really different. But it's not a skill. It's just, it's just them. So that means also they are not able to do that at will. They are not able to do that consistently. Whereas if you're saying that a different kind of creative person is creative because of a skill, meaning they can turn it on and off, they can calibrate it, they can dial it up, they can dial it down. That sounds more like a skill than just, So that means clearly there is a kind of creative person who is creative purely from their personality. And there's a different kind of creative person who is creative because of both their personality, abilities they have, plus some kind of skill layered on top, okay, that allows them to calibrate what they're doing. So just to repeat what I was saying earlier, and to apply that to the idea of creativity, so that means if you're trying to measure creativity under this definition of skills, it has to be clear what the success conditions are. Is it the ability? Should it be the ability to display, like in the divergent thinking, ability to just generate lots and lots of answers, which is, sometimes that's how some of these creative measures work. Is it the ability to come up with a surprising or funny answer? That's a different kind of success condition. And you will have to measure and actually judge. A lot of these tests require human judges to tell whether it's, clever enough, creative enough, unusual enough. Until, I mean, they're trying out chatbots to do that, the kind of thing. But the thing is, I can only assume that if your answer is so unusual, chatbot would have difficulty Okay, so it's still best to have some human in the loop, maybe at least one. Um, so you have to define the success conditions of what exactly it is. And yeah, I mean, what we're doing when we're creating these tests is we're trying to study components of creativity. It's quite clear that, measuring someone on a game, like, think of different uses of a empty picture frame, is not really what we mean by creativity. Like I said, what we mean by creativity is actually doing useful stuff in the world. That's what we want. But the thing is, if you're a researcher studying how it works, the nuts and bolts of creativity, you have to be able to access those nuts and bolts. And that's why you're creating these more targeted, precise tests that are not measuring big creativity, but, components. That's the thing. And as long as we're trying to do that, then I think it's best if you can try to define exactly what the success conditions of each of those maybe smaller skills within creativity that you're thinking of. Um, I think, following from what I said earlier, it's algorithmic. A skill has to be algorithmic, and what I mean by that is that there's a procedure. There's a procedure that if done in a certain way, it works. If done in another way, it might not work. But the thing is, that leads also to the idea, since it's a procedure, you can cut it, you can stop it, or it can be stopped by some external thing. Okay, you can stop because you were careless, you made a mistake, it stops. Okay, but that also implies that you can tweak it, you can change it. Sometimes the original algorithm you learned, you realize you could do it another way and it still works. Some of those tricks for, say, computing stuff mentally, math, arithmetic. Some of those, maybe you were taught in a certain way when you were a child, but then you learned this new way, a shortcut to do, say, multiplication in your head or long division. And then now you discover that, okay, I can reconfigure the algorithm I used to have. Okay? But it is an algorithm. It's a stepwise thing. And you can fail it because you can miss one of the steps, or you could mix it up. And that's the thing. A lot of abilities, like what I said, color perception. There's no such thing as being careless with your color perception. Either some kind of space neutrino knocks out your like retina or whatever, or some other malfunction happens in your brain. You're not gonna make the same mistake when you're perceiving colors or detecting differences between tones. Your brain can make a mistake, but that's nothing at all the same as the mistake you're making when make a mistake when you're doing mental arithmetic. I hope you can see that, because that's the thing that makes them different. And so that's what I mean by algorithmic. Not that there's processing happening, because the brain is all about processing, but I'm meaning a particular kind of conscious to semi-conscious procedure following. Okay? And it's intentional, meaning, yeah, you can turn it off, you can turn it on, you can choose to be careless if you wanted. Okay? And I think that the word intentional does not appear anywhere in the papers of the Bessie authors, which, is a thing that, I want to ask them why. I should ask them. I don't know any of them, but I think I should email them or on Twitter, maybe. But the thing is, yeah, it's kind of, why would you define skills that way, that you don't even have intentional there? Yeah. So that means your creativity measures, it has to be something that a person can choose to do in different ways. Maybe you can set it up such that you can change I imagine that you can set it up that you can really try to show whether a person is capable of changing the rules they're following in their head. And that's the test of whether they're skilled in the creativity or not. Okay, so one thing I'm following in terms of evidence is this study from Paul Sylvia, where they show that there seem to be differences between people in their ability to judge whether something is creative. Like if you showed them answers like from the picture frame thing we did, if we show them to various people, the idea is, indeed, people are able to discriminate like the ordinary ideas from the creative ideas. They seem to be able to do that pretty well. But some people are even more like consistent okay, and probably, accurate in it. There are some people, and these people seem to be also the same people who are most likely to be also creative themselves. That's the implication. It could be that, part of being well calibrated as a creative person is the ability to just tell whether what you're doing right now is creative or not. And maybe even just like the idea of both being able to be both warm and cold towards other people, maybe part of being creative is to being able to just, I'm going to do this in the least creative way possible. And you can do it. Okay. And then next, I'm going to do this in the most creative way possible. And you can do it too. And someone maybe who's less creative is not, maybe they can only do it one way. Don't know. I don't have any data on that. No one has, well, as they say, you shouldn't say that no one has done it. I haven't checked. So who knows? Someone might have done it. Definitely not none of the people I know. So you can maybe, I don't know if we have time for this, but you can try out like, what if intentionally you try to be not creative? So what could be non-creative uses of an empty picture frame? I don't know, but maybe we don't need to do this, but you can just think about it. If you do have time, I'm just going to wait for just 1 whole minute, just in case some people answer. But yeah, meaning this is what you should measure it both ways. You should measure the first way that I did, where try to think of the most creative way possible, and then you try to add pictures. It probably even more of a challenge if we say you have to give as many answers, but they all have to be non-creative. That's tougher. But, as you give more and more, it will begin drifting away from your original answer. So it's easy. This is like the top answer. Add picture. Yeah. What? It's a challenge to think of something even less creative than that. What could be less creative than using a picture frame as a picture frame? Okay. So that's a challenge, and it's not easy. But I don't know whether it will work as an actual test. But the thing is, hang it on the wall, make a fire. Make a fire is, maybe in between. So if it can burn, but it's definitely maybe not very creative, but I think, so I don't know if that will work, but I think at the very least, your measure of skill should be able to do this, just like any other measure of skill, like driving, flying a plane, can be calibrated. You can try to fly the plane fast, slow, badly, well. Why not creativity? If you're claiming that it's a skill, and I do believe it is, or at least part of it is skill, then you should do that. You should be able to do that. Yeah. So here are some further implications, and you could just think through them and maybe ask questions about them. But some things are like, if it's a skill, I don't know if you're familiar with the idea of cognitive load. In some experiments, they would, at the same time you're doing something like remembering something, they will add on an unrelated task, like they have to do some mental arithmetic at the same time. And the challenge is to try to be able to still do the memory task while doing the mental arithmetic, so that they're adding cognitive load. And the idea is, if you make it harder, someone who's skilled in something like creativity, yes, they could possibly display less skill, but it will fail at a kind of gradual level. And less skilled people, like the same way as someone who is maybe just learning guitar for the first time, if you interrupt them or you give them cognitive load, they simply cannot proceed anymore. They just stop. That's what it is to be a novice, to be a beginner. You can't simply just power through when you are interrupted, when you make a mistake, when you're careless. But an expert can make mistakes, but they will still somehow be able to proceed, maybe slower, maybe with lots of mistakes, but they will be able to proceed. I think if I am at all correct, you could display that in study, possibly. Can you combine procedures? Meaning, can you make up new algorithms for the thing you're doing? And that means that you can change the way you do creativity. But because there are lots of tricks that can be inserted in that kind of creativity task that I showed you. Like one thing is like just follow simple rules of the mind, like reverse it. So you can apply that to say picture frame. So instead of putting things in the picture frame, what if I put the picture frame in something else? Okay? Or what if I, take a picture of the picture frame and then put it in another picture frame? So, meaning reverse what usually is the thing that's the normal thing. Meaning that's a trick and you can apply it to many kinds of, same creativity tasks, whatever. Or, there are various things like that. Just, like heuristics or mental tricks. And the thing is, so what if you ask people to do that and then ask them to combine it, are some people better at doing that than others? I do not know. I would like to say. But combining heuristics might be a sign that you are skilled. Can you identify causes mistakes? Yeah, writing, handwriting. Oh, I forgot to mention handwriting. I was going to refer to you. I had one picture of handwriting a while ago. And the idea was, Katka studies handwriting. Meaning once you know a bit of handwriting as a child, it's also part of your skill that when you get it wrong, you know where exactly you got it wrong. You can kind of see, oh, I did this. Okay, I'm not going to do that again. Less skilled child maybe would not be aware that it was wrong. Okay, so that's part of skill. What would that? I'm very challenged of thinking how would that go in a creativity test. How do you know that you failed? Because that's not easy. You can only know if you failed or made a mistake if you also have that skill of being able to judge creative things from non-creative things. So if that's true, then you would be able to calibrate things. So I think, being able to judge creativity is possibly one of the core metacognitive things in being creative. So yeah, can you recognize skilled performance in others? That's the implication of the Sylvia paper, that creative people possibly are aware when other people are being creative. Okay, just like someone good at sports, when they watch someone else, they know what's happening. They understand the physics of it, the technique. Same thing, I think. So yeah, so these are things I would really like to have the time, energy, and money to test someday. Maybe when the river's done. So so like final, I'm heading towards final thoughts now. So it's like an invitation to colleagues from who do actually creative educational measurement, assessment, stuff like that, because you would know some of these things better than me. You can tell me whether actually the things I'm thinking have already been disproven by some guy, so somewhere. So or whether if any of the possibilities I'm thinking of is even practical. Because if the trend that's happening for creativity measurement just continues, where our proof of whether this works is just refer by correlating it with something else that we don't know whether it works. So we're getting farther and farther away from the kind of creativity we really want to study, which is, like I said, scientific creativity, artistic creativity, ordinary, everyday creativity that people display when when they have problems. That's the thing we actually want to understand. But some of our tests we don't know. Maybe some of them are taking us further and further away from those. So it would be nice to actually go back. It's a validation problem essentially. Final thoughts. So I don't think all of creative performance is a skill. Like I said, some of being a creative person is due to personality, what you like to do, preferences, motivation. Some of it is raw ability. And this I need to really think about what are those. That is not a skill, but I think there are some ability, that just maybe processing speed, something like that, just that raw. I'm talking about something like that. But there is another part where, in order for you to actually benefit from all of that personality and ability, you have to have calibration, and that's a skill. It's a kind of metacognitive thing. So to measure creativity as skill, we should know what skills are, and I don't think, at least in psychology, we understand what it is. And I'd like to hear from people if, in case you have, you've seen people talk about skills in a better way, better than me, or the Bessie people. And the Bessie people talk about capacity. they don't give really a good definition. I've been looking for a clear definition of what capacity means in psychology. I don't know if there's such a thing as concept of capacity in English, and whatever equivalent it is, it might have in Czech or Slovak. I don't know. I don't really know. I'm trying to look for it because any other example would be useful just for me to contrast with my idea. Because right now I don't have anything else to contrast it aside from Bessie and maybe Paulus and Martin. I think that's 87. Not a lot more. Yeah, so that would be great to have those inputs, discussions, you know. And that's it. Thank you all for being here. So you can do we,
Should I?
I guess questions or
This my ability to
discussion.
speak, right? Not a
Oh yes, yes, yes.
Okay, so if you have any questions, because I have something in my mind, but I don't want to interrupt your ideas.
Should we check the?
Or we can check the chat. The blah blah blah. The arrows, which is going.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Chat.
Yeah, chat. Thank you. It was very informative.
Okay.
Um,
So just checking, just in case.
So if you have any questions for the chat, you can write it down to the chat.
Yeah. Just also to repeat that we've recorded this, right? So they
Yeah.
can ask for a recording, and also the full slides can be found.
In the beginning.
Yeah, here. So and this link, all slides are there. Let's go back to.
The chat. Okay. So I don't know how to where to go to this discussion, because I was like you said, I'm studying handwriting. So according to your presentation, it's a skill, right?
Yes,
Because
but
you said
like there is a component of it that should be a skill.
Okay.
Just like creativity, I don't think the whole of creativity is skill. Just like handwriting, I would agree that some of it is like, just ability wise. I think I forgot to give the example based on handwriting that, if say you were born with no hands, so it really affects your ability to display skill, meaning it affects your ability to display the skill. But, you could learn to compensate by still writing even without it.
Typing, but my idea is that specific learning disorders is usually also named as specific learning disabilities.
Mhm.
So disability comes from ability.
Yeah, yeah.
How it comes from skill or
Yeah, I mean, like I
what
said,
does it mean? Because you said it's about a calibration of the skill, right? That you can perform it better or worse. So I think that the children in the school want to perform handwriting well. So
yes.
and not to choose to perform it in a worse, like
Indeed, yeah. Like I said, you don't have to actually want to perform it badly to have that ability, a skill to perform it badly. It's just the idea that if it's a capacity, then you can if you wanted to.
Yeah, I'm sorry. They want to
Oh.
slide. Sorry, I'm interrupting.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So now I don't know what you know better than me what the theories about, say, certain kinds of disabilities, learning disabilities, handwriting, or speech difficulties are. But my understanding of that would be there is some kind of basic ability that is impaired or absent.
Okay.
And then what you're doing when you're doing remedial work is teaching them skills to compensate. Meaning it's quite possible, I don't know, maybe sometimes the ability is recovered, but possibly for certain things that are congenital, there's nothing to recover. What you're really doing is teaching them skills on top of the missing ability to still enable them, to perform. And that thing that's partly possibly for some of them. That's why it's more difficult. They can't rely on some of the, just things we take for granted, processing that happens in the background, which I would call abilities.
Oh.
So, yeah.
And my second question is about because as you talking about the calibration of the process, what about the Dunning-Kruger effect?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because not everyone is able to process or to assess our own abilities or skills. So
Yeah, I mean,
so this is like a problem in this, right?
I suspect that would be true if like the Dunning-Kruger, and maybe for people who are not familiar with it, it's the ability that people who are less skilled don't know that they're less skilled, and so they will think that they actually can do it, and they will fail. So yeah, so that's a Dunning-Kruger effect. It's kind of it's an experimental effect, meaning it's supposed to be demonstrated in certain kinds of experiments. If you want to say that it's a general thing, meaning it applies to all kinds of parang thinking, that it's involved, the Dunning-Kruger is involved in all knowledge, all kinds of knowledge you might have, then yeah, that would affect the idea of, that means whatever the Dunning-Kruger effect is tapping or assessing, it will be one of those things that have to define what a skill is. Meaning just the ability to calibrate well your beliefs about your own ability would probably be a core or a key part of what a skill is. But I don't think that I don't know. I haven't thought, so that's a good question. I haven't thought of it. I kind of right now, I'm thinking it's not that general, meaning it applies to certain beliefs.
Okay.
And maybe certain kinds of skills that I don't know are not so ego involved, that does not involve you wanting to think of yourself as good person, smart person. Those kinds of skills, maybe they will escape the Dunning-Kruger effect. And mainly what you need is simply calibration rather than some belief that you are correct or not. So, but that's a good question. I need to think further about that.
Okay, thank you. Maybe you can check the chat.
Just check,
If there is another question. Yeah.
just in case.
No.
More thanks from Odessa. So thank you, colleagues from Odessa. I hope you find the slides useful.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you. So next morning,
Bye.
another one.
So I close.
Yes.